Hey, everybody. Welcome to your horoscopes for the week. These are the horoscopes for the week ending August 5th or 6th, August 6th. I just brought them up. I just looked at the date and I already forgot what that was. I think we can chalk that up to getting a year older. I think every year I get older, that just happens more often, but that's okay. I think that's something that we all share a little bit. These are the horoscopes for the week ending August 6th. So we are officially out of July into August. If you live somewhere that is hot as you know what, like I do, you're probably celebrating that a little bit. Get this hot out of here. If you live someplace that doesn't get hot very often, and you really love the summer and it's very short, you're probably a little bit sad that it's almost over. That's actually a really good example of perception. Everybody's perception is different depending on their experiences, and I actually am fortunate that I've been able to live both experiences, places that are just so hot. I hate summer, and growing up in places that weren't that hot, and I loved summer, and of course school was out back then, and all those types of things. So the perception is always different person to person depending on their experience, and I feel that that's really taught me tolerance for other people's opinions and or experiences, because we live in a world where your experience really does have an effect on what your perception is. So there's my little babble of a lesson for today. But let's get started with the horoscopes, because we got a lot of really challenging, and even in some cases some crazy stuff going on. So we're going to go ahead and bump right into it, and we're going to start with Aries. We still have Jupiter retrograde this week, and of course we're going to have Jupiter retrograde for a few months. It just went retrograde, so we're looking at until I think it's September or October before it goes direct again. Jupiter retrogrades can be a little bit of a challenge. Jupiter is all about growth and expansion, and in retrograde that sort of mirrors that growth and expansion back at you, or it makes you feel like you're unable to grow and expand in some cases. With focus on the day-to-day duties, which is what Aries is focused on this week, probably even this month for all intents and purposes. When you're talking about growth in your day-to-day schedule, we hear a lot. In fact, I hear this a lot, and I hear it from my own mouth sometimes too. I wish I had the time, or I just don't have the time. And a lot of people actually say that on a fairly regular basis. I know I'm one of those people that has been known to say that once or twice. The issue with focusing on the amount of time you have in that way is that you're literally putting limits on how much time that you have. And the truth of the matter is that even the busiest person in the world can find time in their schedule for something, whether it's visiting with family or visiting with friends, or just taking that time away from business for a while to focus on something else. You can always find the time. And so this week is really what that's about. It's about taking yourself out of that, I just don't have time for this space, and really focusing on, why don't you have time? And it's not your busy schedule. It's, do I really want to do this? Or, do I really want to make plans with this person? Do I really want to take the time to do my grocery shopping, or do I want to have it delivered? I a lot of times will say I don't have the time to go grocery shopping. And in some cases, that's true. But most of the time, it's because I don't want to go to the store. I'd rather have it delivered, kind of a thing. So, and that's fine if I want to have my groceries delivered. But am I being honest with myself about it? Or am I, just saying, just trying to come up with an excuse so that I don't actually have to go, kind of a thing? Those are the things that you want to look at, or the things that are coming up this week. Also, there is an element of, with Jupiter in retrograde, kind of closing down that time in your schedule a little bit. There's also an element of really paying attention to how you're using your time. And that is always really important. A lot of times for me, when I say I don't have the time for something, that's usually because that time, or a lot of cases, that time is being taken up by me, because this is what I want to do. Either it's time with my family, or it's self-care time. It's time for me to decompress and not be on, in terms of talking with other people. And this is actually a very important part of your schedule that never should be replaced by something else, because, to be honest with you, self-care is always important, especially if you work with a lot of different people. You need to be able to have that time to decompress and to just kind of sort of, ground and bubble that away. And you can ground and bubble 3 times a day, every day. You still need time to yourself to process what's been going on, and then kind of sort of move past it. And if you don't have that process time, your energy level gets lower and lower and lower and lower, and you start to feel more and more and more overworked and overused, and it just, it becomes kind of a nightmare. So this week really is all about that. It's about how you manage your time, really. Not so much whether you have the time or not. It has a lot to do with how you're utilizing that time, and where you can find space for time for certain things, if you want to, or if you need to, and where you look at your schedule as how balanced your schedule is in terms of work time, play time, rest time. That is really important. So that is what I have for you guys. And I'm going to move on to Taurus. We have a total conjunction coming up this week between Mars and Uranus. And that is going to make things a little bit easier for you. And it's going to make things a little bit more difficult for you, especially with the Sun and Mercury in Leo right now. We've had this square with Saturn, between Saturn and Uranus, for a while. And when Mars moves into conjunction with Uranus, that makes an even more powerful challenge. You add Mercury and the Sun into another fixed sign, you have a much bigger challenge. So now you're talking about a challenge that involves 5 different planets at some point. So that can be a little bit tricky. It's going to cause a much bigger challenge. The first thing that I will say about this, with focus on finances, and in some cases relationships, and in some cases relationships to your finances, you do have a relationship with money, believe it or not. A lot of people look at that, and or when I say that, they say, well, it makes no sense because money isn't a person. Nobody said that relationships had to involve people, right? We have relationships with pretty much everything, and we have preconceived ideas with pretty much everything as well. And money is a big part of that when you think about it, because money, let's face it, there isn't a point in your life where money didn't mean something in your life, even in childhood. And this actually kind of blew me away once, because I was working with a coach, and the coach was talking about money and said, let's do an inner child meditation on money. And I thought, in that moment, I thought to myself, why would we do that? I mean, in childhood, everything is taken care of for us. So why would we even have to broach the subject of a relationship with money? When I did the meditation, I remembered that my first business I created when I was 13 years old. I had a babysitting business, like most 13-year-old girls at the time. in the late 80s, early 90s. That was how we made our money, right, back then. And I started off with one client and then picked up two or three more clients. And my stepfather, who was in my life at the time, helped me with getting one of those clients. He's the one that got the client for me. And so I was making money, and I was making money, pretty good money for a kid, to be honest with you. And, I learned at the time, things like scheduling and making sure that I didn't double book myself, with clients and stuff like that. And then my stepfather, he had his good points and his bad points. We'll just put it that way. Comes up to me one day and says, all this work and you're neglecting your chores, right? So I am going to start taking your money and keeping it until you can balance out your school and your work and your chores, right? Well, the truth of the matter is that he never gave me back that money, and he had no intention of giving me back that money. He was using me. And so what I learned from that was that you can work as hard as you want, but there's always somebody there to take your money. And if you bump into adulthood, that is what it feels like. You get a paycheck, and as soon as you get the paycheck, you got to pay your rent, you got to pay your bills, you got to put gas in your car, you got to buy food. And every year that goes by now, that gets more difficult. The gas prices are going up, the food prices are going up. The amount of money that they're paying people is kind of going up, but not really. I mean, it's for minimum wage, it is, but if you make more than minimum wage, you're not making any more money. So it forms this preconceived idea. And I really feel that this has a lot to do with that challenge right now, is looking at what your preconceived money ideas are, and really taking some time to meditate on that and find out what the roots of your preconceived money ideas are. Now, when I did this inner child meditation and I sparked that memory, and all of a sudden all this stuff came up, it changed everything about my perception of money. Because at that point I said, well, I don't want to walk around with these notions of every time I make money, somebody's just going to take it, because what that results in is me not making as much money, because I'm trying not to give it away, or I'm trying not to allow somebody to take it from me, right? The truth of the matter is that nobody is taking it from me. I'm choosing to pay my bills. I'm choosing to pay my rent. I'm choosing to buy food and to do, take care of my responsibilities. That's what it's all about. If I think about it in terms of every time I make money, somebody takes it away from me, well, then that takes the power of me being able to make the money that I want to make. So this week for you Tauruses really is about, it is going to create a challenge. You are going to feel like you're working and working and working, and no money is coming in. And it really feels difficult, because your energy level starts to go down, right? In terms of the energy that you're putting into making this money. By understanding where those roots are, you also have the opportunity to release those preconceived ideas, which makes room for you to actually create the idea that you want to focus on now. So that's what I have for you guys. Good luck with that. And we're going to move on to Gemini. No planets are influencing Gemini except for Pallas Athene, which is a planet. It's an actual planet that exists. It is a dwarf planet, but it still has an impact on your chart, with focus on your long-term goals, travel, education, things like that. What are your long-term goals now? Pallas Athene comes in as a very strong influence for you guys, especially with not a lot of other influence. And the good thing about these minor planets is though they may aspect each other, the aspects are not like, say, major planets aspecting each other. So there's less challenge with their focus and more help with their focus. Pallas Athene is known as in two ways. One, the warrior queen. This is a feminine influence that is a fighter. And normally, if you go back in the day when these planets were named, you didn't have a lot of feminine power. You had a lot more masculine power than you do feminine power. So when you're talking about a female that is a fighter, this is a very different influence than, let's say, a male who's a fighter, because of course the two will fight differently. You talk about back in the in high school, right, when you would see people getting into fights, okay, male fights were always pretty cut and dry. There was some fist action, there was some punching, but for the most part, they had certain rules, right? There were certain rules to abide by in terms of a gentleman's fight, right? Women don't have those rules. Women fight dirty. Girl fights are always about hair pulling, whatever you can grab and rip off, sometimes shirts. My husband and I in high school had one of those interesting moments being present for a girl fight where the shirt just came right off, and all the boys really had a really good time watching that fight. But women do fight dirty because they use every resource they have, because they don't have the same resources as men when you think about it. So, and when you're talking about your long-term goals, and Pallas Athene's influence really is on money. So we're talking about long-term financial goals. This really is about looking at your goals and how you're going to structure your goals and what you're going to do in order to achieve those goals in a much different way than you ever have before. So if you've always followed the same rules, this time the rules don't apply. It's time to change up how you fight. Am I saying to fight dirty? In some cases, yes, that does resonate, or that is something that does exist. In some cases, you do have to fight dirty. Now, I know that sounds a little weird, but let's talk about the world that we live in. Okay. The world that we live in is not a nice world, and it never has been. These, looking back on the good old days when everything was wonderful, again, this is all about perception. Our perception of what that looked like was great, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was. Okay. So perception and reality, in many cases, can be two different things when you think about it. If you're going back to when you were a kid, well, of course, everything was wonderful when you were a kid. You had no responsibility. You didn't have to work. You didn't have to pay for anything, right? As an adult, you have responsibility. Things aren't going to happen unless you get up and do it. It's a whole different world, kind of a thing. So of course you're going to look at childhood as a much easier time in your life, or a much better time in your life, because you didn't have the same responsibilities that you do when you're an adult. Coming back to Pallas Athene, sometimes you do have to fight dirty when it comes to making money. For instance, if you are looking to get a specific job and there are 3 other people that want that same job, you can't just sit back and say, okay, well, I'm going to be nice because I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, because one of those 3 people is coming in and they got their boxing gloves on. They're going to compete with you. They're going to do whatever they can to make sure that they land that job and you don't. So you actually have to come in with that fighter mentality. I'm going to land this job, not these other people. So in a sense, you're fighting dirty. Are you going to pull a mob thing and eliminate them and throw them in a garbage can? No, that's a little too dirty, right? But you do have to be competitive, and you do have to have a certain amount of oomph to stand up and say, I want this job and I'm willing to do just about anything that I can in order to get it. And really, that's what Pallas Athene's influences. So when it comes to your long-term financial goals, this week is all about taking a look at a different way of creating those goals. You've done things that worked in the past, things have changed. It's not the same anymore. You have to change how you do it in order to make sure that it's successful in the long run. Last thing I'm going to say about this, I have a friend of mine who's a Gemini. And when it comes to money, he's really good at making it. That's really about it. There's no such thing as financial goals. There's no such thing as retirement. There's no such thing as a bank account like the rest of us have, because with his financial downfalls, we'll say, he has learned that he has to have a specific type of bank account where they never overdraft him. Otherwise, he's always in overdraft. He's learned that he has to stay away from certain websites because he will just buy stuff because he needs to buy it, you know, kind of a thing. That's in a way helping him with his financial goals, but that's not aggressively helping with your financial goals either. In my opinion, the best thing for him to do is understanding that he does have the downfall is great. He's right on track, but really putting himself in the position of saying, okay, I know what my downfalls are. I'm going to avoid them, rather than put things in place to make sure that I am not allowed to do that anymore. So this is what I'm talking about being a little bit more aggressive with your goals. It is a good idea to spend that time understanding where you've gone wrong. But you also, growth is all about doing things differently. It's about becoming better than you were yesterday, not preventing yourself from being bad, if that makes sense. So that is what I have for you guys. And we are going to go ahead and move on to I'm sorry, not Venus, Cancer, which has Venus in it currently right now, also focused on long-term goals. And in a very helpful aspect with the moon, right at the beginning of the week, we have the moon and Uranus and Mars and Venus in a grand sextile. This is a very positive aspect. So it's a very helpful aspect. And Venus, with all of its creative energy, also for a sign of Cancer that gets really deeply connected with other people, very deeply empathic people, Venus does have a tendency to amplify that a little bit. And while in some cases that's a good thing, in other cases, it can make things a lot more difficult. So if you're an introverted Cancer, for instance, and you have a hard time dealing with people, Venus's influence is just gonna boop that a little bit more so that it makes it a little bit more difficult for you. But this aspect is actually very helpful because with your focus on long-term goals, the moon's focused on those that support you, and Uranus and Mars is focused on money. You're really looking at a couple of different things. You're looking at your long-term financial goals, but you're also looking at being able to step out of thinking your thought process that it's all down on you, to widening that out a little bit and saying, you know what, it is all down to me to do the work. But that doesn't mean that I don't have the support that I may need in order to accomplish this as well. One of the things that really stops people from actually even creating a goal process at all is there's a couple of things. One, it feels really difficult when it seems like you're the only one doing it. Okay. And it's all down to you. And that responsibility can be very heavy for some people. The other thing that stops people from even making goals, let alone achieving their goals, is the work that you have to put into it. This day and age, let me make this as easy as possible on myself. And I'm a victim of that as well. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you guys. Let me make this as easy on myself as possible. Well, goals aren't easy, and life isn't easy either. And when you go through life trying to make it easy on yourself, you wind up screwing yourself in the process because you never really get anywhere. Life is tough, and achieving goals is tough also. That's why it's such a big celebration at the end of it, because really you had to put a lot of work into it. You had to do a lot of things, and you can get to a point where you achieve that goal, and years later all of a sudden it changes and it seems like you're losing that goal. You have to start a new goal process in order to keep up with the evolution of it. It's exhausting, but this is human evolution. This is how this is how we grow. This is how we become better people. And on a soul level, this is how we develop on, in terms of being or stepping into the shoes that we're supposed to step into, that we signed a contract to step into. It's a little bit difficult and a little bit of a pain in the butt. But it makes perfect sense when you think about it, because life is supposed to challenge you, because it's the challenge that makes you better. It's the challenge that helps you grow. It's the challenge that takes you from being this person and developing into this person. But how you handle the challenge it is very much dependent on the type of person that you want to be. So this week, it really is all about taking stock of that, reminding yourself of the person you want to be, reminding yourself of where you want to be and what you need to do in order, pardon me, in order to achieve that goal, and then put the work into it. But put the work into it in such a way that you enjoy every minute of it. And trust me when I say that that is possible. You just got to put a little work into that as well. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we are going to go ahead and move on to Leo. We've got the sun in Leo this week. We've got Mercury in Leo this week. And of course, because there is a square in two of the other fixed signs, Mercury and then the sun, they're going to turn this into a much bigger aspect. We're looking at a T square here. And as a matter of fact, to make things even more interesting, by the time we get towards the end of the week, about Friday, maybe even a little bit on Saturday, this becomes an even bigger challenge when the moon moves into Scorpio and you have planets in every single fixed sign. This T square becomes what is called a grand cross. And in this case, it's a fixed grand cross because all of the signs are in fixed signs. Now, fixed signs don't like change. They try to avoid it as much as possible. Why? I don't know, because human evolution, we have to change. So avoiding change is just kind of one of those things that makes no sense, right? But it's human nature. We don't make any sense anyways when you think about it. So when you have a challenge that's really big like this, especially fixed, it really feels like no matter what it is that you're trying to do to change the situation that you're in right now, it feels like you keep hitting brick walls every single time. Luckily, this huge challenge only lasts for a day or so, but the T square by itself is still a really big challenge. Your focus is on career, and in some cases, those who support you this week. The rest of the challenge, the focus is on self, is on money, is on relationships, and it is also focused on the home. That is like most of your life right there when you think about that. So when it comes to, and especially with the moon's influence in self, this is actually really teaching you how much of this emotional stuff you're really taking on and holding on to. And that, I think that's really the root of a lot of the challenge. As you start off with the T-square by itself really has a lot to do with a balance or imbalance issue, if you will, depending on how you want to look at that. Balancing your career and your home and your health and your family and your relationships. That can be a challenge for anybody. It's definitely a challenge for a fixed sign, because fixed signs energetically don't move as quickly as, say, mutable signs like Gemini and Sagittarius do. They seem to have more time for everything. And it's not because they have more time for everything. They just bounce from one thing to another. Fixed signs like to do and then rest, and then do and then rest, and then do and then rest. And that takes up more time than just bouncing from one thing to another. There are good points and there's bad points to it. In terms of this challenge, which is going to be present for this week and next week in terms of the T-square, you're looking at really feeling like your responsibilities at home are really having an impact on your relationships outside of the home, and in some cases, your career goals. In many cases, this could play out as you have your family. There's a lot going on within the family, and so that is a distraction from the things that you want to do in terms of focusing on your career goals and spending time with other people. This can also play out. I have a client who is recovering from surgery. She's literally stuck at home, and she's a Leo. She's literally stuck at home right now. And so that recovery process is going to get in the way of her being able to focus on her career goals and even focus on some of her relationships. She can't go anywhere. So it can play out in that way as well. So it is it's a frustrating challenge is what it is. I wouldn't say that it's a destructive challenge unless you become emotionally destructive towards yourself, and then yes, or even others, and then yes, it is an emotionally destructive challenge. As we get to Friday and the moon moves into Scorpio, and this becomes a T-square, it becomes a grand cross instead of a T-square. Now the moon is coming in and focusing on you and saying, okay, now emotionally, how are we making this more difficult on ourselves? That seems like something that is really going to be helpful. And in many ways, it is something that's going to be really helpful, but it's not comfortable. It's not pleasant. And it's generally not what most people's first choice of focus is when you think about it. Most of us will do whatever we can to avoid having to look in that mirror. But the truth is, looking in that mirror is really the only way that you're going to understand why you do things or react to things in the way you do. So the challenge is necessary because it's teaching you something. It's annoying. It's frustrating. Nobody wants to deal with it. Totally get it. Doesn't mean it's not going to come up over and over and over again. So that being said, that is what I have for you guys. My best advice on getting through this challenge for this week and even into next week to a certain extent. My best advice in getting through this challenge is to take the time to understand what the roots of the frustration are, to take the time to sit with your frustration for a moment and honor it and say, okay, I hear you, frustration. Now let's see if we can't find a way to turn this frustration into something that's constructive, because frustration usually stops you in your tracks. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And now we're going to move on to Virgo. We're going to kick off the week with the moon in Virgo. And on Sunday, that's not necessarily a bad thing. as the moon forms a grand sextile with Venus and Mars and Uranus. This is a very helpful aspect, actually, with Virgo's focus on those that support you, and Venus's focus on long-term goals. Uranus and Mars focus on money. This is, it gives you a really good reason why monetary security is really important for you. As we move into Monday, however, the moon is still very much present in Virgo, but it does create a bit of a challenge when it moves into opposition with Neptune. Now, Neptune's focus is right smack dab in the middle of those you love and your day-to-day focus, your day-to-day activity, so your daily schedule. And this sort of creates a bit of a challenge when it feels a little bit like you're getting less support than you're giving out. And that's always a challenge for most people, actually. There's a lot of people out there that are givers, and they give and give and give and give and give. And when they need something and nobody is there, it's kind of like the little red hen, the story of the little red hen. She kept going around asking everybody, did they want to help her make the bread, and nobody wanted to help her make the bread, but everybody was there when the bread was done and she was ready to eat it, kind of a thing. That's a story that stays in my mind, and has stayed in my mind most of my life, because it's true. You run into that situation a lot. Most of us do. In this instance, our automatic reaction is always, well, screw those people. I'm done dealing with them and I don't want to help them anymore, which you can't always do, depending on the situation and the circumstances and the people. But at the same time, this is less about those people and more about why we insist on putting more into others than we are putting into ourselves, really. And so it does create some frustration, and it does create a challenge. But as the moon is moving into positive aspects, continuing to be in that positive aspect with Uranus and Mars focused on money, and of course Pluto, which is focused on the home, now we're actually looking more at, okay, maybe I have spent so much time focused on other people, because I'm actually trying to avoid focusing on what needs to be fixed in my own house, when you think about that. And that, my friends, is really the main reason why most people focus on other people most of the time, because it's easier, or at least in theory, we think it's easier to fix other people's problems than it is our own. The truth is that it's not. We don't have control over what people do. So, you can give them all kinds of ideas. They still have to follow through with it. And if they don't follow through with it, of course, they're not going to fix anything, right? But that's out of our control. We can easily get frustrated over that. What is absolutely in our control is everything that goes on with us, with ourselves. And so it really comes down to this week, the moon is coming in and saying, yes, it's always wonderful to help other people. You should help other people, but you should never sacrifice your own needs because somebody else's needs happen to be present in that moment. And when you're talking about Virgos, who are known narcissism or narcissists, a lot of people look at Virgos as being all about themselves. That is absolutely not true. Most of the Virgos that I know would walk through fire for the people that they love. The issue is, the more you walk through that fire, the more likely you're going to get burned. And those people will stand on the sidelines and go, oh my God, I can't believe that so-and-so is getting burned. I really should do something, but I don't want to get burned too. And when you look at it in that context, it sort of does become a little bit easier to step away and say, hey, you know what? I think you need to walk through your own fire for a while, because I've got my own thing that I need to do over here, kind of a thing. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move on to Libra, because the moon moves into Libra on Wednesday, and a little bit of time on Thursday. And this is going to create some challenges for you as well. We're going to start off with Wednesday when the moon moves into opposition with not Pluto, Jupiter. You're looking right at it, but there's so many planets, it's like, you're calling your kid and you call them every name but their own, 5 times before you remember their name, kind of a thing. Opposition with Jupiter. Jupiter is in retrograde. Jupiter is all about growth and expansion. In retrograde, that kind of slows the process down a little bit. And with Jupiter's focus on your day-to-day duties, the moon, of course, being all about emotion, and Libra's focus, the moon's focus for Libra is really all about the inner closet. So you may find yourself around this time, you may find yourself dealing with situations where your schedule is changing, other people are changing your schedule, you're ready to get things done, but other people aren't ready to get things done, which is very frustrating and is going to cause an emotional response because the moon's in your sign, right? But also, there is an element of wishing that everybody was just like you in there. Now, every Libra that I know, their cardinal signs don't like to sit still. They like to get up and move around and do stuff. So if yard work has to be done, they're up and on it. If work has to be done, they're up and on it. My husband's a Libra. You never see him, when he's even at home, you never see him sitting and doing nothing. He's always up and tinkering with something. Okay. Whether it's the most important thing in the world right at that moment or not, doesn't really matter. He has to be doing something at all times. And one of the things that frustrates him so much when he's working is he wants to get up and get it done. And if he has to wait for people who, like me, for instance, I have to get up and wake up for an hour and a half and then get up and get myself ready to go. It's been 3 hours and this man is still waiting to get started, and it drives him insane. I'm sure it does. This kind of thing is going to be coming up a lot around this time for 2 reasons. One, it's showing you that just because you are the way that you are doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is the way that you are. And that's okay, because we're all different for a reason. We're supposed to be different for a reason. The other thing that's going to be coming up for you guys is managing your frustrations over that. Is it really necessary to get angry because over the same situation that you've been dealing with the same person for 27 years, when you think about it? Instead, in these days, I think that my husband has this pretty good. We know we have some place that we need to be together. We know what time that's going to happen. He keeps himself busy until that time. So he's not just sitting around waiting for me. And that way I get what I want, he gets what he wants, and we've got this sort of symbiotic relationship going on. As the moon moves, continues to be in your sign on Thursday. Actually, this is Wednesday. I'm so sorry. We're going to have different challenges as the moon moves into a T-square with Pluto and Venus. Venus being your ruling planet. Now, we're still focused. Actually, the moon is right on that cusp between your secret closet and who you are. And your secret closet, believe it or not, does make up a lot of who you are when you think about it. A lot of people wear their trauma like a badge, and that's really not the right way to deal with your trauma. I'm just putting that out there. Venus is all about, Venus's influence is all about long-term goals. Pluto's influence is all about the home right now. And this is really going to create a challenge when it feels like what your responsibilities at home and what you want to achieve with your long-term goals doesn't exactly add up. Now, this is a problem that everybody has, right? You have certain things you want to do, but you got to pay your bills, right? And that takes up your money. So you have no money in order to put into your long-term goals. This is a problem that everybody has. Here's the thing. If you're dealing with the problem in the same way over and over again, definition of insanity, you don't change the way you deal with it. Therefore, it never changes. Therefore, you're just chasing your tail. You're like a cat chasing your tail. This does not help you. This doesn't make you feel better. If this way isn't working, you have to find another way. And the challenge comes up to sort of push you in that direction to make you do that. Now, the good news is the moon moves into a trine with Saturn, and Saturn is retrograde. When Saturn is retrograde, focused on the home at this time, you look at what responsibilities belong to you and what responsibilities belong to other people. Clearly, we'll say you may not be the only person financially responsible in your household. So you have to look at who else needs to step up and take some of that responsibility. Or you're looking at how you're really being responsible and whether or not you're really taking on your responsibilities. So for instance, this would be something along the lines of, are you taking care of your responsibilities right away with your paycheck, or are you spending some money on fun stuff or things that you don't need first, and then kind of falling short on the responsibilities? If that is a problem, of course, you want to definitely take a look at that and make sure that you change things around a little bit so that you're not constantly in that cycle either, because that cycle really will wear you down after a while. As the moon moves out of your sign, things start to calm down a little bit, which is good. And your focus is still on self to an extent, but you're also looking at changing. This is sort of the starting gun being shot off that says, okay, we've been focused on self. Now we're going to start focusing on the inner self. And the inner self does bring up some challenges also, but we'll get to that later. So that's what I have for you guys. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to Scorpio, where the moon moves into Scorpio Friday, Thursday, and Friday, a little bit also on Saturday before it moves into Sagittarius. Scorpio's focus is on self also, with a little bit of an element of the past and coming up. And in some cases, it's showing you the situations that came up in your life that sort of made you who you are today. Now, the truth of the matter is that I had mentioned earlier on in the horoscopes, people who wear their trauma like a badge. And the thing about wearing your trauma like a badge is that it's not your trauma that made you. It's how you dealt with your trauma that makes you who you are when you think about it, not the trauma itself. So you can have two people that have gone through a very similar type of trauma, and they're completely two different people. One person loves despite their trauma and their abuse. One person, will not. They'll be very distrusting of other people because of their trauma and abuse, even though they sustain the same amount of trauma. So that's the proof there that tells you that it's not your trauma that made you who you are. It's how you handled your trauma. Did you decide to heal from your trauma? Are you holding on to your trauma like a badge? Are you blaming the world for your trauma? Or are you understanding that trauma happens to everybody and it is what it is? You have to work through it. There's a lot of different ways for you to deal with that particular situation. The moon coming in to your sign at the end of the week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and it will move into Sagittarius later on in the day on Saturday, presents another challenge. Of course, as the moon as we start off with the moon in your sign, it moves into a square with the sun and Pluto. The sun's focus is on career. Pluto's focus is on the home. The moon's focus is on you. Now, there are always those instances where you've got a lot of stuff going on at work, you got a lot of stuff going on at home. It feels like you never have time to really put into either place. And so this creates a challenge because, of course, when you're at work, you're thinking about all the stuff that you got to do at home. When you're at home, you got to think about all the stuff that you're doing with work. You're never quite focused on either one. And that is something that the moon is trying to show you. You need to be focused on what you're doing at the time, not what needs to be done later on or what needs to be done tomorrow. As we move into Friday, the moon moves into a fixed grand cross. Now, we talked about this fixed grand cross a little bit when we were in Leo. Luckily, this is only going to last for a day into Saturday a little bit, but it starts to break up on Saturday as the moon starts to move out of your sign. Now, a grand cross is the biggest challenge you can get in terms of astrology. This is when there is a planet in every single sign of the same mode. So in this case, there are 4 fixed signs, and there is a planet in every single one of them. And when you have a fixed grand cross, fixed signs, they don't like change. They tend to try and avoid it as much as they possibly can. Of course, you can't, right? It's not how our world works. And if you haven't looked at the last 100 years, we've changed a lot. Okay, we'll just put it that way. We've changed a lot. So there's no way to stop change. Why we keep thinking in our minds that we can, I don't know. But, I'm a fixed sign too. And I don't like change either. I will say that. I understand that I'm stuck dealing with it, but I still don't like it. And I do have the right to not like it. The issue with not liking it is you spend so much time resisting it that you're not focused on what you need to do to grow. And you can't grow without change. Now, the moon's focus is on self. So that's what your focus is. The sun's focus is on we're still focused on career, still focused on the home. Add an element of an opposition with Uranus and Mars, which are focused on finances and relationships. This seems like almost every aspect of your life is just having a challenge right now. The good news is it's not going to last very long. Thank goodness for that, right? It's not going to last very long. But when you're looking at your life in terms of everything is a challenge, you have nothing to turn to that seems good. And so this is probably going to cause a bit of an emotional response for you guys, just putting that out there. But you get to control the emotional response. It's the emotional response that makes things difficult. And yes, you have a right to the emotional response, but you don't want to wallow in it. The longer you wallow in that emotional response, the more difficult it's going to be to get back into doing something about it. If and when you can, I should say, because we're always in those positions where we can't necessarily do something about it when you think about that. And that just means that you have to accept the fact that you can't change it. Kind of funny when we're talking about resisting change, you have to accept the fact that you can't change. And it becomes, a little bit of a challenge there. Again, as we move into the end of the week and the moon starts to move out of that challenge, it is still in opposition with Mars and Uranus, very much focused on finances and relationships. And you're looking at the roots of where this challenge comes from. Your focus is on the past. Why am I having these financial challenges? Why am I having these relationship challenges? When you look to the past, to understand where the difficulties lie, you start to see where relationship patterns, negative relationship patterns developed in your younger years. Negative financial perceptions changed in your younger years. So, for instance, if you grew up in a household where your parents were always talking about how they're broke all the time, or saying things like, where do you think money doesn't grow on trees, you know, kind of a thing, you're going to carry a perception that money is hard to get for the rest of your life because that's what you were raised with. And so, consequently, you may not work as hard to improve your money situation when it comes down to it. So this is a good opportunity to understand where those roots come from and disconnect yourself from those roots. Just because that happened doesn't mean that that is the law. That was your parents' opinion based on what was going on at the time. It's a completely different world right now. We have different ways of making money these days than our parents did back then. And then when you disconnect from those perceptions, you open up the ability to be able to change that perception. So the moon is definitely going to have an impact on us fixed signs this week, but it's not a bad impact when you think about it. It may be difficult and it may be uncomfortable, but it is helping us to be able to see things in a much different way, and a much bigger picture than maybe we have been seeing things. And that actually makes things a lot easier in the long run, because you're breaking old thought processes and you're breaking away from old ways of thinking and moving into a space where you can create your own way of thinking. And that always generally is more successful. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're moving into Sagittarius. Not a lot of planet activity in Sagittarius, although the moon will actually move into your sign later on in the day, on at the end of the week on Saturday, before the end of the night, we'll move in there. And the moon, it does create a challenge sometimes. It's something that we're very used to. The moon is in our sign once a month, every month, for a couple of days. It's not like we ever get away from that. But because it's the planet of emotion, it does have the ability to throw an emotional spin on whatever is going on for you at the time, especially if there are any planets that are the moon is going to be aspecting. Luckily, there is no planets in Gemini, so there's not a whole lot of opposition possibilities going on. But there is the possibility of a square with Neptune when the moon moves into Sagittarius at some point later on in the day on Saturday. Your focus is on the mind, and we've talked about your 100 browsers that are open and the amount, the ridiculous way that Sagittarians think. And I won't say it's ridiculous, it's just different than others, so we'll put it that way. But really what we're working on, or what we're focused on this week, is that stinking thinking mentality. Stinking thinking is a thing. And it is a thing that every single human being is going to have to deal with at some point or another. It's what I call when you are bad-mouthing yourself in your head, or your negative thought processes towards yourself. So for instance, when you're creating a goal, and you tell yourself there is not a snowball's chance in hell that I'm going to be able to achieve that goal. That stinking thinking stops you in your tracks right then. If you convince yourself that it's not going to work, there is nothing on the planet that's going to convince you otherwise. And so consequently, that stinking thinking has a huge impact on whether or not you're going to be successful in your life. Now, when you don't have time to think on that, you wind up doing a lot of things that you wouldn't think was possible. And it's easy. You just go and do it. You don't think about it. You just go and do it. So this week really is all about that. It's about looking at where you tend to overanalyze things and setting some boundaries on that over analysis, right? The truth of the matter is that the more you think about something, the more you're going to fear it, the more worried you're going to be, the more likely you are to make a mistake with it, the more likely you are to just not even do it at all, because it sounds like a whole lot more work than is really necessary or that you want to put into it. And the truth is that it may be a minuscule amount of work, but we can make things bigger or smaller depending on how we think about it and how we approach it mentally. And that's really what this week is all about. It's about taking stock of how you approach things mentally and making sure you're doing it in a positive way, in a way that is helpful, in a way that is going to be successful, rather than in a way that's going to hold you back or stop you from actually moving forward in those goals. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move on to Capricorn. Still have Pluto in Capricorn, obviously. In fact, we're going to continue to have Pluto in Capricorn for the rest of the year into next year. Pluto is still retrograde. Pluto is your sense of power and transformation. And when it's retrograde, there are times where it feels like you can't make changes that you would like to make, or you have no power over making the changes that you want to make. And Pluto's opposition with Venus this week is going to create a little bit of a challenge as well. Pluto is right on the cusp of how you think and your focus on the home. And Venus's focus is very much on long-term goals. Now, how you think about those, in terms of creating those goals is really what it's all about. Capricorns are not afraid of hard work. That's one thing about Capricorns. I think that sets them apart from everybody else. They're not afraid to work. I haven't really met a Capricorn. Well, I almost lied to you. Okay. I almost lied. I actually have met a few Capricorns that don't like to work, but for the most part, most of them do. They like making that money. And that's a big part of their long-term goals is making that money. They're usually pretty good about investing it too. Not all of them. There are quite a few who like to make it and spend it. So it's like a hole that just, kind of goes in their pocket. But in terms of long-term goals, I think Capricorns have an easier time with that because they enjoy goals. They enjoy setting goals for themselves. They enjoy achieving those goals. And it's like being able to tick that list of things that you want to do. They enjoy ticking off that list, which is a good thing. The drawback, I think, to that for Capricorns is when you're in a situation where you have goals, but it feels like you have no power to achieve them. And that's when the Capricorn pessimism starts to come out. And the Capricorn pessimism is what's going to get in the way for you this week. That pessimism is derived from many different places. It comes from many different places. For some of us, it comes from our trauma, our past trauma. For some of us, it comes from learned behavior from the adults, around us when we were growing up. In many cases, it's derived from something completely different, something outside of ourselves. Although in many cases, it is derived from our own experiences as well. The bottom line is that the only person standing in your way is you. And We live in a world where we really love to point the finger at other people. It's always somebody else's fault. That's not the case. And I'd say 95% of the time, that's not the case. If you allow somebody to get in your way, it's still your responsibility because you allowed them to get in your way. And it's as simple as that. And a lot of times, Capricorns are so family oriented that it's those people that become a really good excuse as to why you can't do this and that and the other thing, because you're stuck taking care of this person and that person. Now that's the challenge. Here's what is helpful as especially at the very end of the week when the moon moves into a grand sextile with Pluto as well as Neptune, bringing those planets together to help each other out. With Pluto's focus being right smack dab in the middle of how you think and your home, you do want to be aware that sometimes your responsibilities at your home can be a really good excuse why you can't do something, right? And so because of that, these other two influences come in. The moon's focus is on the past. Neptune's focus is on those that you love. And it really kind of helps bring that all together. Yes, you have people that you love, and yes, you have family, and yes, you have responsibilities. But you want to look at what's actually your responsibility and what's not. And here's a real prime example. Okay. I have adult children. I love my adult children. It can be very easy to say, oh, I can't focus on my business because my adult child needs my help over here. Now, every once in a while, that's okay. Right. When it becomes a daily issue, I need to look at where I am enabling my adult child and where I am using my adult child as an excuse to not further my career goals. So yes, there are some instances, I have a disabled adult child. Now the disabled adult child is in a completely different group of people, right? It does create challenges and I'm okay with that. That is my responsibility. My other two, not necessarily. Unless, I mean, there are instances where that comes up, but it's not a day-to-day thing. So this week is really all about looking at that for what it actually is, not what you've created, not what you, are using it for, but what it actually really is. Are these my responsibilities, or can they be given to somebody else? Or can I tell the person who is responsible for it to take care of it? Because the truth of the matter is that your goals are your goals and nobody's going to achieve those goals but you. So if you don't put the work into it, it's not going to happen. And that's really what it comes down to. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And I'm going to move on to Aquarius. Aquarius still have Saturn. Saturn still retrograde. And when the moon moves into Scorpio at the end of the week, and with Mercury and the sun in Leo, and with Uranus and Mars in Taurus, that's a planet in every single fixed sign. So this becomes a really big challenge. We start off the week with a T-square between Mercury, the sun, Mars, Uranus, and Saturn. And a T-square is a pretty big challenge because it's taking up three different aspects of your life. In this case, we're looking at career. In some cases, we're looking at those who support you. We're looking at relationships. We're looking at money. And of course, we're looking at the home. And Aquarius is focused on the home. When you take all of those aspects together, that's almost your whole entire life. When you think about it, right? We're always focused on money and our relationships and our career. And in some cases, those are who support us, and the home, right? And when you're looking at, oh my God, I have this plate with all this stuff going on, And Saturn is retrograde, showing you what is your responsibility and what isn't your responsibility. This challenge is coming up just to tell you, you cannot do all this by yourself. Okay. You need to delegate some responsibility. Focus being on the home. If you're a woman, the home is your domicile. It's your responsibility. Most of us do all the housework. We take care of all the people in the house. We do all of the food preparation and feed everybody and everything. And to be honest with you, feeding people is my way of showing love to others. And that's a part of me that I love and hate, okay? Because I actually do hate cooking, to be honest with you. I've been doing it for so long, I'm just sick and tired of doing it. We all have those instances that come up. However, right, I've been in a situation recently where I have responsibilities to certain family members that are older that I have to take care of. I have responsibilities at home, not quite as many. My children are grown, but there are still certain responsibilities there. And my control issue says if I'm not on top of how the garbage is taken out and when this has happened and when this happens, then the whole house is going to fall apart. And in some cases, it kind of does, you know. But what it really comes down to is if I have to focus on making money, making these videos, honoring my responsibilities to my clients, honoring my responsibility to my elder family members, honoring my responsibility to making money. Oh, yeah. And of course, I have other family members that would like to see me every now and then, friends that would like to see me every now and then. I'm exhausted just thinking about it. I really am exhausted just thinking about it. So what do I do to give myself a little bit of space? It all comes back to what's going on at home. I have adults, a house of adults now. Do I really need to be feeding them every day? No. Do I really need to be doing all of their laundry every day? No. Do I really need to be the only one cleaning the house at home? No. My control issues say you're not going to do it right, so I don't want you to do it. Okay. And that's where I'm getting in my own way. If I release that control and say, you know what, this needs to be done and I don't care how you do it, then what happens for me is that frees up a little bit of space because my responsibility is now not that anymore. And I have more time to focus on something that is my responsibility. And this is what this challenge is going to create for you. It's going to create this chaotic, oh my God, you're being pulled in a million different directions so that you can sit down and say, okay, which of these directions is really a direction that I need to be pulled in? Or am I taking on somebody else's crap here? I like to say that Aquarians are so powerful we can do anything, but that's not true. We're human. May not seem like it sometimes, but we are human just like everybody else. And being human like everybody else, we have limits. And you want to be aware of your limits because if you step over that limit, you're looking at getting sick. You're looking at becoming incapacitated in some way. You're looking at having a mental breakdown or an emotional breakdown, none of which is going to help you take care of your responsibilities. So this week is really all about taking stock. What is my responsibility? That stays on the list. What belongs to somebody else? That goes to their list. Don't care if they like it or not. That's irrelevant. It's all about making sure that you're not making yourself crazy trying to do everything while everybody else gets to have a vacation every day, because that doesn't work. That's not fair, right? And when you look at it in terms of not just because, oh, well, I don't want to ask them to do it. But if you look at it in terms of enabling, when you're enabling people, you're not doing them a service. Okay. When you enable people, you put them in the position where all of a sudden they are on their own. And you know, one day I'm not going to be there and they're going to be on their own. What are they going to do if they don't know how to cook for themselves or do dishes for themselves or wash their own laundry or clean the house? Um, they're going to be living in starving in a house that's dirty with no clean clothes. You know, that's not what I want to do for my family. I don't want to put them in that position. So, looking at it from that standpoint, yes, they're going to be resistant. Yes, it's going to take some time, but eventually they will get on board and things will start to move a little bit smoother because those things are not 100% on your plate anymore. So, think about it like that. And that's what I have for you guys. And finally, we're at Pisces. Neptune continues to be in Pisces, and Neptune continues to be retrograde this week. We also have Vespa and Juno, two smaller influences coming into your sign as well. Juno is known as the grand consort. It's all about partnership and it's all about marriage. It's all about doing things together, not standing on your own, like Pallas Athene being the warrior queen. It's not that she stood on her own, but most of the time it was her fight, not somebody else's fight. When it comes to Juno, this is all about partnership. And this brings up issues in partnership. Or if it's not bringing up issues, it's showing you where partnering with somebody is more helpful than doing it on your own. And Vespa's influences is Vespa is what they call the eternal flame that that continues to burn on the hearth. And when you think of a hearth, you think of home, you think of that homey place, that place that is comforting to you, right? And we always have that comfort with a nice roaring fire in the fireplace. There's just something about that that is just so cozy and nice and warm, unless it's 100 degrees at your house, in which case you don't want that happening at all. But it's not about the heat, and the warmth really is about comfort, right? It's also when you look back on your life and your childhood and you think about the family, you being a kid and your family all gathered around the fireplace. This was a very comforting, very secure time in your life. And to recreate that in your reality now is absolutely necessary, with focus on those you love. And right at the end of the week, actually, when the moon moves into Scorpio, there is a trine between Neptune and Venus all week, but this becomes a grand trine as the moon moves into position on Friday when the moon is in Scorpio. Now, trines are very helpful aspects, and this one is a very big helpful aspect. So it's three planets in three signs that are all in the same element. So in this case, we're talking about water signs, right? There is a planet in every single water sign working together in some way for you. With the moon's influence on self, Venus's influence on long-term goals, and of course, Pisces' focus is on those that you love. This is an opportunity really to recreate that sort of comforting family unit, especially in a time where you might feel like you don't have that right now. You have, your family's all doing all their own things and different things, and it's really hard to kind of get everybody together in one spot and have that sort of warm, fuzzy, my whole family is here feeling kind of a thing. That can be a challenge every now and then. So recreating that this week is I feel really important. You of course can't go back to childhood and recreate it exactly the way it was when you were a kid. That's just impossible. You can't do that. But what you can do is recreate that with the people that you have there now in some way, shape, or form. And by doing that, or even in some cases, and I know this is the case for me as well, and many people that I know, We have created our own family. We're not related at all, but we have created our own family. And in that sense, when we get together, that is our eternal flame. It's our comfort spot. It's where we are the most ourselves, because we are absolutely 100% in a space where we will not be judged for our actions or who we are. Now, don't get me wrong, we will call each other out on our shit every day. That's why it's the glue that keeps our little extended family together. However, that space is also the space where most of us feel the most comfortable, because we've been together for over 30 years. If we were going to judge each other, it would have been done already. And even when we are judging each other, it doesn't mean anything, right? Because it's always done with love. And that's kind of the premise of that. When you have that kind of relationship with people, you expose yourself to pain from those people without realizing it, because you lull yourself into this false sense of security that that's never going to happen with these people, right? They love me and they would never do that to me. And that's not necessarily the case. People are people. It doesn't matter how long they've known you. It doesn't matter how much they love you. The worst parts of them are going to come out. It always happens. So this week's focus really is about not just paying attention to that coming up, but it also has to do with your focus on those that you love. Are you focused on those that you love as a chore, as a, this is my responsibility, and so it's a heavy burden? Or are you enjoying your time with these people? You can, like with my grown kid, for example, doesn't live with me. I can focus on the time that I do spend with him, and which is not every day, but the time that I do get to spend with him, I love every minute of it, because it's not every day. Actually, if we spent time together every day, we get on each other's nerves, to be honest with you. But I enjoy that time every day. Every time that I get to spend that time with him, I enjoy it as much as I possibly can. What I don't try and focus on is how much time he's not home, because then I'm not enjoying the time that I have with him. Then when I do see him, it's, oh, so you finally decided to come by and see your mother, kind of a thing. Is that going to make him want to come home and visit his mother again? No, absolutely not. He's going to avoid that as long as he possibly can, because let's face it, he does not want to hear about how he is failing his mother, right? And so instead, when I do see him, I don't always do it, but I try to let him know as often as I can how much it means to me when I do get to spend time with him. And if he feels that it means a lot to me that I'm spending time with him, he'll do it more often. So it's all about how you communicate with your loved ones, right? You're trying to manipulate them into coming and visiting with you. It's not going to work very well. But if you appreciate the time that you do have, and appreciate that you're going to have more time later on when you don't have it, you stand a better chance of being able to have more time, more constructive time, more time where you're not working together necessarily, but you're having fun together. I think that every married couple in history has had this problem. You fall into this pattern of the day-to-day life. This is the work that I have to do, right? And there's really not a whole lot of time left for fun. Maybe even intimacy sometimes kind of sort of goes out the window because you just don't have time with it. This week, you want to take a look at that differently. You don't want to look at your relationship as we're in this together in terms of the work. You're also in this together in terms of the fun that you have, the relationship that you have. When was the last time that the two of you really sat down together and had a good time? These are the things that you want to look at. These are the things that keep relationships going. If you get together and every time you get together, it's a fight or it's a problem or you're constantly having to defend yourself, you're not going to go and hang out with that person anymore, right? Any more than they are going to want to hang out with you if you're doing that. So this week really is about taking stock of that, finding that place, finding substitutes when you can't have the exact place that you want, and making sure that the relationships that you have around you, yes, you have responsibilities there, but looking at it in terms of not just your responsibility, but what it is about those relationships that you enjoy. Because the more you focus on what you enjoy, the more likely you're going to continue to have that. So that's what I have for you guys. That's what I have for everybody. That's it for the horoscopes for this week. I'm Melissa Bruce, the Heavy Metal Psychic. And I don't have anything else to say about that. Thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you guys next week. Make it a great week, guys.